He's got a poster saying Tiger Time, again, Richmond bar mats. He's got a picture of what looks like a World War II Spitfire up there. That's always good to see, some aircraft and some football memorabilia and a few drinks. How could you not have a good time in something like that? Okay, keep the calls coming and the emails and the pictures of your home bars if you have them, 96900 693. I'd be particularly interested to see if anybody has just built one in the last few years, because they were quite a thing in the 70s and the 80s. I remember my father had a house, this was after I left home, but he lived there from the late 80s to the early 2000s, and he had a full-on bar. It was like something out of a pub. It was good. All right, but what about gun control? So Gun Control Australia has released a report today saying that guns are on the increase here in the state of Victoria. They say there are over 830,000 firearms registered in the state. So that's roughly one gun for every 6-odd people. There have been an increase of 65,000 guns registered in the last 3 years. There are over 220,000 firearm licences, and 10,000 of those have been awarded in just the last 3 years. Is there something about which we should be concerned? Of course, John Howard tightened up the ability to own a gun back in the 90s after the Martin Bryant massacre down in Tasmania. Joining the line now, President of Gun Control Australia, Sam Lee. Mr. Lee, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oh, sorry,
Thanks
Ms.
for having
Lee.
me.
Sorry.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.
What worries you about these figures? Because, I mean, I'm assuming these are the legit figures, aren't they? These are the people who register guns and have a firearms licence and so forth?
That's correct, yeah. So it's great in the sense that people are registering firearms. Our main concern is that in relation to gun deaths, the 80% of gun deaths are due to suicides. So guns aren't just used in crime, they are used against people, but also to harm the person who owns the firearm themselves.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I saw an analysis a few years ago of cities that had, how do I put this, well-known suicide spots, bridges, cliffs, that sort of thing. And when they were fenced off and people couldn't throw themselves off anymore, the suicide rate didn't change. People who decided they wanted to do it still found another way to do it. Are you certain that if you reduce the number of guns, you would reduce the suicide rate?
Well, research shows that if you use a different means to try and kill yourself, for example, pills, that it's more likely that someone may be able to rescue before you actually die. So a suicide with a firearm is pretty fatal. The other issue is also massacres. The problem is that we just don't know who's going to commit a massacre, and the majority of gun owners really don't want to hurt anyone and have no intention of hurting anyone. The problem is that we just don't know who will, and when they do, they can cause a lot of damage.
But what's the solution to that? I mean, if you don't know, if you're saying anybody's a potential massacrist, I mean, do we get rid of all guns?
No, and the National Firearms Agreement did not intend to do that. What it did intend to do is regulate firearms. We're also not saying that you can't have guns. What we are saying is that you can't have certain type of firearms, in particular high-powered semi-automatic firearms.
But they've been banned. They've been banned for quite some time.
The semi-automatic handguns aren't banned. Semi-automatic long arms are. The reason for that being is that Martin Bryant, during the Port Arthur massacre, used a semi-automatic long arm, and that handguns had some regulation around them during that time.
Yeah, but can I tell you, I've done a reasonable amount of shooting with semi-automatic handguns. I mean, A, they're very hard to get, much harder than getting rifles, and B, I mean, to be honest, they're not the weapon of choice for a massacre. They're hard to aim, they're inaccurate, they jam all the time. You know what I mean? Like, they're not used all that much for that sort of thing.
Well, they were just recently used in the recent massacre in the US. The person used a .45 handgun. Semi-automatics, I mean, the problem with them is that they can just release a number of fire capacity in a very short period of time. It's a harm minimisation strategy.
But sorry, but then you'd have to ban all handguns because every handgun is semi-automatic.
Well, that's right. Semi-automatics themselves, we are of the view, should not be available for civilian usage. Our main aim is just to try and reduce harm in the community through guns, and a way to do that is just to reduce the number of guns per licence holder. Again, we're not saying that you can't have guns, but we are concerned in regards to semi-automatics in particular.
Okay, but I mean, for example, the pistol shooting I've done has been, I've done a couple of little competitions and things, and that's the main reason people use them. So you would ban pistol shooting? Because, I mean, all pistols, be they revolvers or semi-autos, are semi-automatic in nature.
Yes, our position is that any single-shot firearm would be allowed, but semi-automatics would not be allowed for any civilian usage.
Right, so all pistols banned for civilians?
Or semi-automatic handguns
Well, no,
should
but
be
sorry,
banned
but
equally.
do you understand what a semi-automatic handgun is?
Well, what I know is that semi-automatic long arms were banned after Port
Yes, I'm
Arthur
not asking that, but I'm saying, because the way you're answering the question suggests to me you're not quite sure what a semi-automatic handgun is. Is a revolver a semi-automatic handgun?
No, it's not.
No, it is. You pull the trigger once, the bullet comes out. Pull the trigger again, another bullet comes out. That's semi-automatic. A pistol is also, what's called a semi-automatic pistol is just a different mechanism, but it's the same thing. Pull the trigger once, bullet comes out. So a revolver is a semi-automatic weapon.
Look, our main concern is to try and minimise harm in the community. Semi-automatic handguns can release a number of firepower in just a few minutes, and they were used during the Port Arthur massacre. We want to try and minimise any level of potential grief that could occur in the community through someone losing a life. And again, we're not saying that every gun owner out there has an intention to hurt someone. What we are saying is that it's a process or a framework of harm reduction and harm prevention.
All right, so basically all pistols banned for civilians, be they revolvers or semi-automatic pistols, but you could still have a bolt-action rifle or a 12-gauge shotgun or something like that, say for use on a farm.
Well, the law allows for certain use of firearms if you meet a genuine reason, and farmers are allowed firearms for certain reasons, for example, vermin animal control. What we are, again, aiming for is trying to reduce access to high-powered firearms and ensuring that proper regulation of firearms out there in the community.
But what would you define as high-powered? I mean, for example, you could have a bolt-action 308. I mean, a 308, you can knock something over at a kilometre and it will still kill you. I mean, that is high-powered, but it is not semi-automatic.
Well, we want the laws to be equal in terms of they already ban semi-automatic long arms, but they do not ban semi-automatic handguns. There needs to be consistency within the legislation.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Sam Lee there, President of Gun Control Australia. Well, I think it's pretty clear that Gun Control Australia doesn't actually understand that much about firearms. I mean, to say that a revolver is not semi-automatic is simply not true. A revolver is semi-automatic. It's just a different sort of semi-automatic. To say that you don't want weapons that are too powerful, well, legally you can have a bolt-action 308, which is a very powerful weapon, but that is allowed, not banned. I think that it's important to be very clear about what you want banned and what you do not. 96900 693 13 13 32. It's 18 past 5. 22 past 5.